Every other business in the world has to build something, ship something, or convince a customer to choose it over a competitor. A lobbying firm does none of that. It sells one thing, a phone call that gets returned. And that turns out to be worth an astonishing amount of money. The entire federal lobbying industry in the United States now runs at well over $5 billion a year. And it's grown almost every single year for 2 decades, straight through recessions, through gridlock, through whoever happens to be in power. Here's the paradox at the center of it. Lobbying is one of the only businesses where the customer can spend a few $100,000 and get tens of millions back, sometimes billions, and yet most people have no idea how the actual money works. So by the end of this, you'll understand what a lobbying firm is really selling, why its product has possibly the highest return on investment of anything in the legal economy, who actually gets rich, and how, and why the whole machine is almost perfectly designed to never stop growing. The first thing you need to understand is that a lobbying firm is not selling persuasion, it's selling access. And access is a completely different product with completely different economics. Persuasion would mean walking into a hostile office and changing a mind, which is hard, slow, and unreliable. Access means you already have the relationship before the conversation starts. The whole business rests on a simple, brutal fact about how government works. A senator's staff takes thousands of meeting requests and can grant only a handful. The lobbyist's product is being in that handful. When a client hires you, they are not paying for your eloquence. They are paying because you used to be the chief of staff for the chairman of the committee that controls their industry, and when you call, that office picks up. You're not selling an argument. You're selling a door that's already open, and a door that opens on command is worth far more than any argument, because arguments can fail, and a return phone call rarely does. So now look at the core money mechanism, because this is the number that explains the entire industry, and it is genuinely hard to believe the first time you see it. Researchers studied a real piece of legislation, a one-time corporate tax holiday passed in 2004 that let companies bring overseas profits back home at a tax rate of just over 5% instead of the usual 35%. They tracked 93 corporations that lobbied for it. Those companies spent about $283 million on lobbying. They saved an estimated $62.5 billion in taxes. Do that division. That is a return of roughly $220 for every single dollar spent, a 22,000% return. To put that in perspective, if you had put $1,000 into the stock market that year, you might have a few $1,000s today. If you had spent that same $1,000 on lobbying for that tax holiday, you'd have gotten $220,000 back in a single year. There is no other legal investment on earth that reliably does this, and that one statistic is the gravitational center of the whole industry, because once a corporate finance department sees a number like that, lobbying stops looking like a cost and starts looking like the best performing asset in the entire company. And this reframes what the client is actually buying. They are not buying influence as a vague nice to have. They are buying the cheapest possible insurance against and the cheapest possible lever on the single most powerful force in their business, the government. Think about what Washington can do to a company. It can write a regulation that wipes out your product line or carve a loophole that saves you $1 billion. It can hand your competitor a subsidy or hand you a defense contract. It can set a tariff that sinks you or one that sinks the foreign rival undercutting you. Against forces that large, spending a few $100,000 a year on a firm that can shape the outcome isn't an expense. It's the most rational purchase the company will ever make, which is exactly why, when you look at the biggest spenders, you find the industries with the most to gain or lose from a pen stroke in Congress. Pharmaceuticals, which has spent more than $6 billion on federal lobbying since the late 90s and has been the top spending industry for most of that time. Healthcare as a whole spent over $740 million in a single recent year. The money tracks the stakes exactly. So who actually gets rich here, and how? This is where the tiers come in, and they look different from the other businesses we've examined, because the product is people. At the bottom is the solo lobbyist or tiny shop, often a former mid-level staffer, billing maybe a few $100,000 a year, living on a handful of clients and a couple of relationships they can still call on. In the middle is the established firm, a dozen or two lobbyists, several million in annual revenue, with a roster of corporate clients on monthly retainers. And at the top sit the K Street giants. The largest single lobbying firm in the country recently pulled in around $68 million in lobbying revenue in 1 year. And these top firms make their money on a beautifully stable model, the retainer. A big client doesn't pay per result. They pay a flat monthly fee, often $20, $50, $100,000 a month, just to keep the firm on call. That's the secret to the whole business being recession-proof. Whether or not a bill is moving, whether or not anything is happening, the retainers keep flowing, because the one thing a corporation can never risk is being unrepresented in Washington when something suddenly does happen. You're not paying the lobbyists to act. You're paying them to be standing there, ready, the way you pay an insurance premium in the months nothing goes wrong. But here's the part that makes the economics almost magical for the firm owner, and it's the engine underneath everything else. The revolving door. Your inventory, the thing you sell, is relationships and inside knowledge of how the government works. And the government refreshes that inventory for you for free every single election cycle. Every time an administration changes or a member retires, a fresh wave of chiefs of staff, committee aides, and former officials pours out of government and onto the job market. Each one of them walks out carrying exactly the product a lobbying firm sells. A Rolodex of powerful people who will take their call and a working knowledge of where the levers are. And the pay jump tells you precisely what that knowledge is worth. A senior congressional staffer might make well under $200,000 a year in government. The day they cross the street to a lobbying firm, that same person can command several times their old salary, sometimes climbing into seven figures, doing essentially the same work from the other side. Nothing about their skills changed overnight. What they're being paid for is the access they accumulated on the public payroll, which they can now rent out on the private one. The government trains your sales force and then hands them to you. And this is the quiet genius of the model. A normal company has to spend enormous sums developing its product. A lobbying firm's product is developed inside the U.S. government at taxpayer expense and then delivered to the firm fully formed every time the political winds shift. When your side loses an election, that's not a disaster. It's a restocking event. Because all your allies who just lost their jobs are now available to hire, and they bring relationships with the people still inside. The firm wins whether its party is up or down. There is no bad season. There is only a constant churn of fresh, expensively trained, publicly funded talent flowing one direction across the street. Now, every business in this series has a flaw, and lobbying's flaw is subtle, because it's not that the firm gets destroyed, it's that the entire system feeds on itself in a way that's almost impossible to stop, and the firm is the one collecting the toll. Look at what actually drives lobbying spending up. The more complicated the government makes the tax code, the more companies have to lobby just to understand and survive it. The more aggressively regulators move, the more every industry has to hire representation to defend itself. The more one company lobbies and wins, the more its competitors must lobby just to avoid falling behind. Each new rule, each new loophole, each new threat creates fresh demand for the exact service the firm sells. The industry doesn't just respond to government activity, it profits from the complexity of government itself, and that complexity only ever seems to grow. That's why the spending has risen almost every year for 20 years, no matter who controls Washington. The firm isn't betting on a party. It's betting on the permanence of a giant, complicated, powerful government, and that is about the safest bet in American life. There's a name economists use for all of this, and it's worth saying plainly, because it's the dark version of that 22,000% return. They call it rent-seeking. It means getting richer not by creating new value, not by building a better product or growing the pie, but by using influence to redirect a slice of the existing pie toward yourself. When a company spends $283 million to save $62.5 billion in taxes, no new wealth was created. That $62.5 billion simply didn't go into the public treasury, which means it has to be made up somewhere else by other taxpayers or by cuts. The lobbying firm sits in the middle of that transfer and takes its fee on the way through. Every dollar a company spends lobbying is, in this view, a dollar not spent inventing anything or hiring anyone. It's pure friction, a toll booth built on the road between private money and public power, and the firm owns the toll booth. So step back and look at the whole machine. A lobbying firm sells the one product that consistently returns $220 for every dollar spent, which means demand for it is effectively bottomless because no rational corporation can refuse a return like that. Its revenue is recession-proof because clients pay flat retainers to stay represented whether or not anything is happening. Its product, the relationships and the inside knowledge, is manufactured for free inside the government and delivered to the firm every election cycle through the revolving door, getting more valuable each time the political winds change. And the entire thing is powered by the steady growth of government complexity, which generates its own endless demand. The old idea is that lobbyists change minds in Washington. They don't, really. They sell the returned phone call, the open door, the seat at the table that was reserved before anyone else even knew there was a table. And the deepest irony is the one buried in that 22,000%. The most profitable investment available in the American economy isn't a company that builds something, or a stock, or a piece of property. It's the business of quietly rearranging who gets the money that's already there. In a town that runs on access, the richest people